In this presentation, we will take a look at the statement of activities within our not-for-profit practice problem within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our practice problem. We currently have the open windows open. You could open the open windows by going to the View drop-down and selecting the Open Windows list. We're first going to go to our Excel file to see what our objective will be. Within our Excel file, you'll note that down here in cell T49, that's where we're going to be creating our statement of activities. Now, the statement of activities is generated from the trial balance. We're going to be generating it from the second trial balance that we had put together here. So we won't reconstruct it here. We won't build the statement of activities in Excel, but you can review it and see how it was constructed from basically the second trial balance. And you'll note then that we will be putting the expenses together in this, not by their nature, by basically utilities expense, payroll expense, and whatnot, but by what they were used for, their function. In other words, public health, education, community service, management, and general and fundraising. So that's how we're gonna set this up. Now, when you think about this in terms of giving this to someone like the board of directors in a not-for-profit organization, then what you want to do is think about, well, most likely you can put a lot of this information into the one report. In other words, you might want to put in one report, you could put the expenses by both function and nature, and then also break out the items that are with donor restrictions and without donor restrictions. But if you do so, you're going to have it's already complicated enough. You already have these two columns broken out, which you don't even have in a for-profit organization, and you're dealing with a board of directors that might not have all of them really familiar with financial statements. So if you overwhelm them with too many numbers, not really a good thing. So what you want to basically think of is, well, how can I give them, what they need? What do they need without overwhelming them with too many numbers? Well, one way you could do it is you can give them something like this, statement of activities, and then break this information down between the revenue and then the expenses, and the expenses here being broken down into what they're used for, which is going to give kind of an overview of how the expenses were basically allocated by function. And that's going to be a shorter type of report. And this would be our net income. So in other words, very much like an income statement, we've got the kind of revenue type of accounts, which are the contributions. This is the different kind of line item. This is that items where the net assets released from restrictions. So they're coming out of the with restricted items and going into without restricted. So they're now unrestricted. Then we have the expenses down below. And so then the revenue minus expenses would be the net income if it were a for-profit type of organization. Obviously here it's not, therefore we're going to name this. It's going to be one of the major differences of the income statement. We're going to name it the increase in net assets. Recall that net assets is like the equity section, assets minus liabilities. We can call this the increase in net assets. We don't do that on a for-profit. We don't say this is the increase in equity. Why? One reason is because there's other things involved in equity, like there could have been draws or investments and whatnot. So there could be other changes in it other than the change of revenue minus expenses. So in any case, the major change would be the change in revenue minus expenses typically. And so here another name for it would be the increase in net income or net assets. Then we have the beginning net assets and the ending net assets. In other words, tying it back out to basically what would be like the balance sheet account or the statement of financial position. So we don't have any beginning balances because it's the first year of operations. Our next problem we'll do next time, we'll have beginning balances and we'll be able to take a look at those. So that's going to be the major form. Now note that next you're going to want to see more detail here because we do want to see the expenses by what they were used for, but also by nature. So like you can imagine being in a boardroom and they're going to say, okay, well there it is here. Now what were those actual expenses? What were they? I mean, what did you actually spend the money on? Then in this format, we would give another report that would be breaking that information out by what we used the expenses for, and it would look something like this. All right, so that's our objective. We want to basically not overwhelm the board of directors, give them something that's going to be simplified, and then give them the more information as needed. How can we do that in QuickBooks? It's going to be a little bit different. Let's go to QuickBooks, and we're going to go to the Reports drop-down, Company and Financial. We're going to take a look at the profit and loss and the profit and loss by class. So we're using that class function here. Changing the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. We'll change the size then by going to the Customize Reports. We're going to go to the Fonts and Numbers. I'm sorry, we're going to go to, yeah, that's right, fonts and numbers, change the size to 11. Okay, yes, please, and okay. All right, so you'll recall that we had these groupings here. What I want to first do is minimize this report. I'm going to minimize this section, and that gives us our 2 line items of the unrestricted and restricted. So we have a very similar report here that we saw on the statement of activities now. It's a very similar format. The first thing that's different is the name, called statement of activities here. It's called the profit and loss on our report. So I could change that. I'm going to copy the statement of activities, go back to our report, and then I'm going to change the name by going to the customize report up top, header and footer tab, and then we're going to go to the profit and loss and change that to the statement of activities. Then I'll say okay, and then I'm going to minimize this once again. So there we have that. There's the statement of activities. We've got the income, and then we've got the expenses, the bottom line number, net income here, and we can see it's the 44,244, the 234,656, and the 278,900. If we go to our Excel, that's going to be our bottom line numbers here. So everything looks good there. The other change, of course, the difference is that it's going to be called net income here and not change in the net assets. So the bottom line number here is going to be, we said, the increase in net assets. Here it's going to be called net income. How could we change that? Well, we could export it to Excel if we want and then make that adjustment. We can change the name of that account by exporting it to Excel. We can't really do it in QuickBooks here. It will be called net income within QuickBooks. Now, the other difference that we have is, notice that the way we're going to be using these classes is really nice because we can expand this and get the more detail. However, it's not really the same format. Over here, we decided to make the statement of activities and break it out first by function, by what they're used for, and then by nature. First by function and then by nature in the more detail. When we use the classes, we basically have to break it out by nature first. So it's still not overwhelming amount of information, but instead of telling us what we use the expenses for, the more simplified report's going to say, hey, here's our revenue, here's our expenses, here's the unrestricted and restricted, and here's what we spent the money on, not what we used it for. And then when we want to give them more detail, then the next question is, well, can we break those expenses out into what we use them for, the allocation? Then we say yes, and we hit the little plus button. And that's going to give us the more detail, now breaking these expenses out between the community service, education. Those are going to be the total programs, and then the fundraising and admin. So that's going to give us the more detail. Notice, of course, if you take a look at this report, it's overwhelming. This is a very long report. Whereas if you start off with minimizing this, you give a lot less detail. Same kind of concept over here, a little bit different format, where we'd have this report. And then they say, we want more detail on the nature of these expenses. And we'd go down and say, okay, here's this report, which is a bit overwhelming to look at. If you put it all in one report, it gets a little bit overwhelming. So for those that want that, we want to be able to provide that. For those that want less information for their decision-making process, we can do that as well. So that's going to be our reports. Now, the couple ways we can print this, again, what you really want to do is print it this way, give it to them this way, and then let them ask for more information. You don't want to give them this, have them roll their eyes over and not know what to do, just being like deer headlights frozen type of thing. So we want to basically say, here's this one, and then we'll give them more information. So I'm going to export this to Excel as we did before. So we're going to export it. In the prior presentation, we exported to a file. I'm going to go to that same file and put it in that same Excel worksheet. So we're going to go to File or Excel. We're going to create a new worksheet. So it's going to be a new worksheet. However, it's going to be going to an existing workbook. So an existing workbook. Then we can find that workbook. Hopefully it's going there already. And so we're going to find that workbook. It's in problem 1. There it is. It's the financial statement. I typically just double click on it. And then I say export. Please export to that workbook, and it opens it up nicely for us, which is very convenient. So here it is, and so we're going to do our normal kind of changes. Notice it put it in the middle, and it added this new tab. I want to pull it to the right, so I'm going to grab that. I'm going to pull it to the right, and then I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to call it a P and L. I'm going to make it short because it's the short version of the P and L. And then I usually will then go to the page layout, which is this little square on the bottom right. And then I'm going to say OK. That gives me the split screen very clearly. So I'm going to then go to the View tab up top. We're going to go to the Windows group, remove the split. So we remove the split. Then I'm going to go back to the View tab down below and back to normal. And there is our report. Now, the other thing we can do is, you'll recall that we can make a few more changes to make it more not-for-profit-y. Which would be the changing of the increase in net assets. We can say I would rather have that as opposed to net income. So I'm going to paste that there, increase in net assets. So we can do that change. And you can also do a little formatting here too. Notice we created two contributions accounts. If you'd rather have, I like doing that in QuickBooks because it gives me kind of a double check that I've put things in the proper place. But if you'd rather have them in one line, you could basically get rid of the restricted and unrestricted, right? And you could just have one line because it's unrestricted and restricted here. So you could do some more formatting if you'd rather do so. I like having the two accounts in QuickBooks because, again, that's kind of a double check. So you could do some formatting along those lines as well. The other thing you might want to do is you could change the font style if you so choose, and make this basically a negative number, so you can see I can highlight all of these cells. And I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to format the cells. And then if you want to make it I usually would pick currency. You can make it basically brackets around it, and even red brackets rather than having this negative number. If you want to remove the decimals, notice I don't really need the pennies here. I can remove the pennies, which is nice oftentimes. It gives it, makes it a little bit nicer to look at. So you can do some more formatting options. Here, you could do some of those formatting options within QuickBooks as well. It's just, to me, to do some of those formatting options is easier here, and you have a lot more of them that you can format with. Okay, so we're going to save this now. I'm going to save this and say yes, please. I'm going to close this back out, and now let's take a look at the expanded report. So now we're going to say the expanded report. Let's print this one out. So I'm going to print this. We're going to go to Excel again, or export it. We're going to create a new worksheet. This is going to go into a new worksheet. And then we're going to put it into an existing workbook. It should be going to the one we want. There it is. And export. And then we have our standard issues. I'm going to pull this one to the right now. I'm going to take this one and pull it to the right. Left click on it and pull it to the right. I'm going to double click on the name. I'm going to call it a P&L long. And then there's going to be our adjustments for it. I can adjust the increase in the net income here. We can make that adjustment there. And then let's format it. I'm going to go back to the page layout. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to remove the Windows group, the splits. And then I'm going to go back to the first line. Now, notice you can see where this page breaks will be. And you don't want page breaks on the horizontal. So this is going to be really hard because this is a long report to try to get everything that's going to be one page wide. It could be 2 pages long. That's okay. But we would like to have it 1 page wide. So first thing you would do if it's this long, you're pretty much going to have to go to the page layout. I'll do this pretty quickly. But this is the standard formatting stuff. We're going to go to page layout. I'm going to go to the orientation. I want to see it landscape. So we'll make it landscape, and then I'm going to delete all the extra columns, which is column E. I'm holding down Control. We don't need J, K, M, O. I'm letting go of Control so I can tab over Q or S. Letting go of Control, right click in the selected area. I'm going to delete all of those items. So there we have that. Now, the next thing we could do is we could try to delete some of these rows, right? I could format this a little bit differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor here, and I'm going to pull all these to the right. I'll pull that to the right, and I'll show the indentation by selecting these. Go to the Home tab, Alignment, and indent this way. So I'll go here. I'm going to pull this to the right, and if I want to indent that, instead of having another column, I could indent that basically twice or something like that. I can go to Expenses. I want to pull that to the right. And then everything underneath it, I'm going to indent this way. And then the total expenses, I'm going to pull that over. And then I'm going to indent that twice. And then the increase and the net assets, I'll pull that over. So, and then I can delete these two columns, B and A, selecting them, right click, and delete those columns. Now we could try to minimize or shorten some of these columns here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take all the numbers and get rid of the pennies again. So I'm going to select all the numbered areas. We're going to go to, let's right click on it. We're going to go to the format cells. And then I usually make it currency and get rid of the dollar sign. I don't need any dollar signs. You could put them back in if you want. Remove the decimals. I'm going to make them bracketed for negative numbers, and then OK. So there we have that. And then I'm going to shorten some of these columns. So I'm going to select everything but the total. Well, let's select the whole thing. And then we'll shorten some of these columns. So we can make them as short as possible here. Almost there. And then now we've got a little bit over. Okay, so there we have that. Now we need to reformat some of these headers. What I'm going to do is select all the headers. And then I'll go up top to formatting, alignment, and I'll wrap the text. So there we have that. Now notice that you could adjust the size of the text because of where it broke the text up here. But that's going to give us a little bit more room. Then I'm going to bring this in just a little bit on this side till it works. So there we have that. Now you could force it to fit on one page, but you'd be better off to do formatting like this because otherwise the font's going to be really small or it'll be different from the other reports. Now, and then you could go to these that got restricted, and we could go to the Home tab, Alignment, wrap the text here, and make them a little bit larger. So there's some other options you can use. You could change the font size up top on here to get them on one page or do something to fix that. But bottom line, it's on one page now. Those are just some techniques that you could use to help you to format these reports and make them look nice. You want to basically, main thing you want to do is not have someone have to tape or pages together to see one row. So you want it on one page for the rows. They could be column wise. They can be on more than one page, and that's fine. All right, so there we have that. I'm going to go ahead and save this item. And now note that if you wanted to print this report, if you want to print all these financial statements, first let's delete this first one. I'm going to go to this one, right click and delete it. And then there we have it. If I want to print all these, I can go to the File tab, print it, and then I can print the entire workbook. And so now I can print all of them. And if I do that with the Qt PDF printer, it'll print it to a PDF file and have everything in the one PDF file, which is nice. So we'll do that. We will do that next. We'll do that next time. I'm going to close this back out and say yes. Now, if you were to print this report one by one, notice what'll happen is if I go to print and I say report and I go to the preview, notice it's a very small report, right? It's going to be little numbers because it's forcing the report to fit on a page. So it's pretty small that way, although QuickBooks does give you that option to force it to fit on a page, so it's not too bad. If you export it to Excel and use some of the formatting tools there, you have more formatting tools to make it fit without making the font, too small to use. If I go to the options down here, what's forcing it is this fit to item there. If I uncheck that and preview it, then you have the same problem where it's on multiple pages. So that's going to be the how you could print it from QuickBooks and how you can export it to Excel. Also note that if you print it to Excel and a PDF file, you'll have that issue of having multiple PDF files. Okay, so next time, we've now looked at these two. The next question that you can imagine a board of directors asking is, well, what are we going to do with the restricted? I mean, what is restricted? What are the restrictions? Give me the detail on that. For that, we'll run the profit and loss by job report. We'll do that next time.